contact info. We both have to hit the button and do that interaction. So that's a key thing. And then remember the socialness. It's meant to be a social interaction, and the thing is sort of designed that you can kind of maintain eye contact when you do it. Exactly. With a little bit of practice, that works out pretty well. Is that good end-tag hygiene? So you can whatever, Diane, when that makes sense, you can have people mix a little bit trying that out.
Yes. But I have a question for you, which is, of course this is a cute little toy.
Yeah.
But, you know, I bet in the next year I'm not going to go to a single event that this toy is going to be at. Okay? I'll challenge you on that.
Yeah.
No, but my point is this, so I thought the purpose of the session was more to give us some skills that we could use rather than play with your new toy.
Yeah.
Which is a cute new toy.
Yeah.
It's just too big.
So what it is, and actually one of the ideas that I gave Rick from the very, very beginning and when I first met them was I said, if you get hired by a company, let's say a big, Cisco hires you, and it's for a big thing. If you have 4 people from the same office that are staying there, their tags need to vibrate until they split up, because often one of the biggest questions I get asked is how can you keep people, from clumping together? Let me pick up your question. Yes, this is a great little toy, and we are incredibly privileged to have it for this conference. It's not going to always be here. So a couple different things I'm going to walk you through as far as when you're at a non-NTAG event and you want to kind of merge these two. Here, what do you do when you're not with the tag, and how can we best use the tags when we're here? So a couple different things is, one, if you have a traditional name tag, and this is where the Velcro moment comes in, is that your name tags go on your upper right shoulder. And is it Gail? When I shake Gail's hand, the eye naturally goes up the right arm, and you will not remember anything, and I'll see you in 5 years, you'll forget everything else I told you. You'll come up and you'll say, it's on the right shoulder. It happens to me all the time. Someone says, I met you 3 years ago, it's on the right side. And when the eye travels up here. One thing I'll share with you, and it's men who ask me to say this over and over again, please tell women to put it on their upper right shoulder. If it's lower, we are going to look. And if it's on the other side, we're going to be looking back and forth and back and forth. So a couple different things is put it up on the upper right shoulder. Before I go into any event, I try and think of 3 neutral questions I can ask anyone in the room. A neutral question can often be about the event itself. I focus on the event. It's something we all share. You heard in the panel before about people, when the women got together, they all talked about their kids. I don't have children. And I will tell you that very much when I'm at an all-women's event, it's a nightmare for me. Because I don't have that little prop to talk about. And so many things you want to think about, stick with the event. You can talk about MIT. You can talk about technology. You can talk about the weather. You can talk about the Red Sox. Please don't talk about the Patriots. But those are a couple different things that you can talk about that are at this. You can look at the program and say, who are you interested in hearing this afternoon? Or who tomorrow's session? I'm looking forward to this. Have you ever heard that person speak? You can talk about the event and open it up from there and get in there. One thing I'll also share with you about going into events that I have found that works really, really well is I do have someone who goes with me. And it's nice to know I'm going to have I have a couple networking buddies. The challenge is you don't want to stay attached at the hip the whole time. But I do have 2 or 3 different people who I say, you know what, let's go to a networking event. Now, Gail and I will probably have a bite to eat afterwards. It's not that I'm just abusing her to be my pal. The idea is you want to have 2 or 3 different people who you can say, is this a good event for you? And you can get other people, you can vet events, you can vet organizations. I have something called the weather report, which is whether or not you go, or whether or not you join. And part of it is, I can tell you, I go to lots of events. I can tell in a minute, in really about a minute, is this a place I'm going to feel welcomed? Is this a place where I can actually talk to people? Now, I grew up a lot in Colorado, some in the Midwest, and I lived in Asia. So I've lived in Boston for 20 years. I will share with you, if you can network here, you can network anywhere. It's a tough environment to network here. It really, really is. I was just in Michigan last week. It just cracks me up. Everyone says hi. They don't need my life story, and I don't want theirs. Sometimes I get it, especially when you're in a cab and you have no place to go. But It's amazing the difference. And here in the East Coast, I find that the common denominator that Rick talked about that we're trying to find out is, what do we have in common? In many cases, you start with education, because we are such an educated community. Anybody here from St. Louis? In St. Louis, the question is, where did you go to high school? And the reason in St. Louis is there's 2 or 3 incredibly prestigious high schools that you go to, and then you often leave town and come back, but you always come back. I mean, the tagline for the local TV channel there is, it's the best hometown you know. Hello. Now in California, the question people ask each other is, what gym do you belong to? And in each situation, it's how might we know each other, or who might we know in common? So if you could kind of come in with those 2 or 3 questions in your back pocket, also if you can kind of get the conversation started. Now I've done 4 personality tests, and it's been really hard for me to figure out my personality. A couple of reasons is, one, when you're from the Midwest, you're extremely friendly. That does not mean you're an extrovert. And it's taken me a long time to figure the difference out. I've done the Myers-Briggs, I've done the DISC, I've done the Enneagram. If you want a free personality test, you can go onto Match.com. Just tell your husband why you're on Match.com, please. But on all 4 of them, and I do not like to walk into an event and say, gee, here's a whole bunch of people I get to meet. That's Bill Clinton. It's not how I'm wired, but I'm friendly. So part of what I want to share with you is how you can be functional and friendly in these environments when it's professionally appropriate for you to do so. The way that the little 4-year-old at some point is going to know, he's not going to say, how old are you? You know?
Do you want to poll the audience? We had on those points that you brought up?
Yeah.
All right. So we had a couple questions we thought would be interesting to ask everybody based on what Diane was just asking about. So if you have your tag, flip it up, and if you go down to live polling, again, you have to scroll down a bit, a little ways down. Live voting, sorry. It's about 10 down maybe. You can say, okay, look at this question. I consider myself 1, an introvert, 2, somewhere in the middle, 3, an extrovert. And you'll see that there's answer 1, 2, and 3. There's also 4 or 5. You can ignore those. Pick the answer you want and just select it and then confirm it. And we'll get a sense of where everyone comes out on sort of what Diane was talking about. You have to right-click, and then it'll say confirm.
Isn't that fascinating? It's absolutely fascinating. And unfortunately, I don't have end tags in most of my conferences, but I can tell you it would probably be about this in every single conference. If I'm at an accounting conference, it's completely skewed. Do you know how you can tell an accountant is an extrovert? She's looking at your shoes. Sorry. When you're a speaker, you collect bad jokes. Okay, I'm at MIT. You know about the proof that Al Gore invented the internet? It's based on an Al Gore rhythm. I stole that one. But part of the point is...
The shoes one was better.
Sorry?
The shoes one was better.
The shoes is better, absolutely. But part of the point is do not feel alone. You are very much like a lot of the other people in the room. And part of what is great about you having these questions and you approaching other people is they're going to say, thank goodness you came up to talk to me and I didn't have to go up and talk to you. I mean, it really, and I'm going to talk a little bit also about how you get out of conversations, because that can be a little bit of a tricky thing too. In many cases, guess what? They're trying to get rid of you too. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with either one of you. It just means the conversation has taken its course and you want to move on. So you have these sort of neutral conversation starters. You have your name tag on the right. One thing that I often do before I go into an event, and it's tricky, is I do try and have something to eat, especially if it's at a mealtime. And what I will often say is, Mary, you know, we might know each other, haven't seen each other in a while. You want to grab, you know, a drink and something, and we'll sit down here and catch up for a minute, because then you're not doing the juggle. And the juggle is tough because you've got business cards or an end tag that you're trying to show to somebody. You've got a handshake, you've got eye contact, you've got all these things going on. And what happens is your brain is in overload, and that's why you forget people's names. And so right away, name heaven gets bigger because there's more forgotten names up there. And so you have all of these things going on at the same time. So part of what it is to slow